Cheers.
Hello, everyone. This has been a very busy night for us, and I apologize that we're late. So thanks for hanging in there. I would now like to call the December 10th, 2024 Longmont City Council study session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel. It can also be viewed at the longmontpublicmedia.org/watch or on Comcast channels 8 and 880. May we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Christ. Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring. Councilmember Martin. Councilmember McCoy. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Yarborough. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and we would like your name and address. We are now at motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas. Do any counselors want to add items to future agendas? Seeing none, we will move on to actually, I'm going to augment this, and we're going to add a presentation. I'm going to augment this agenda. We had, if some of you, city manager, do you want to make a statement?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I know Phil, the transportation was coming. He's on his way back from across the street. So if you have something else you want to.
Well, the next thing on the agenda, what we're doing is, some of you may have seen in the newspaper this morning that we have the transit company coming in for our microtransit, and there was a picture. Phil Greenwald is the one that has worked on that for about 3 years, and there he is. So he's running over. So we would like him to make a statement and explain a little bit about it. And I personally am incredibly proud of our transportation department that we have this in our city now. Take a breath, Phil.
So, good evening, Mayor and members of council. Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the city. Running back from across the street was fun. My apologies. But we are very excited that on Monday we did have the launch of our Ride Longmont program. And it was great to get a lot of you folks out and about to see that happen. So we really appreciate your time with that. This does need a little bit of history. So I do want to talk a little bit about kind of how we got here. So it all kind of starts with RTD. And we've been struggling with them since I started working here 24 plus years ago. So the first thing that we really talked about with them was how we try to get around the city with those compressed routes that they have. And so only 4 routes in the whole city. And we have been kind of dealing with that as best we can. And one of the great things about this slide is telling us that a trip from Redmond Lane, which is over by Silver Creek High School, is on the 324 bus. And if we want to get from there to Longmont United Hospital today, and you can do this on your app if you want to, if you can do it on Google. If you want to do that today, it's going to take you 9 minutes by car. And so that's great. That makes sense. An hour and a half by bus. That does not make sense. And that's not the way I think you've been telling us that you want to operate in the city. So we've been working with RTD over the years. We've been trying to get it better and better and better. And they've offered a couple different ways to help us do that. And one was the Flex Ride service, that is a call and ride, on-demand call and ride service. Used to be called on-demand, call and ride. And so the idea is that you're supposed to be able to call and set up a ride with them. And there was supposed to be a nice app that worked with that. You'll see what we got, the information that we got back from people who were talking about this and the different reviews that they received. Really, it needs work is kind of the classic line that we get from them on that. So app does not work a lot of the times. You couldn't tell where the drivers were. You couldn't tell the status of your ride. So there's a lot of different things. Glitchiness, inability to track, all those things kind of came up with this. And so really we went to this whole idea of how do we improve access and how do we make it better for the citizens of the of Longmont and us here. So the improved access piece was really critical. Faster journeys, people wanted a faster route across town. The on-demand flexibility piece, where you could really, as soon as you walked outside, you could demand the transit and be able to get it. And that wasn't happening with the other systems. And really a simpler app experience so that you knew when you looked at it, it was very intuitive of what you were going to get. So we did work through the process of bringing on an on-demand operator. And with this, we did have help from RTD. So I will say that they did come through with what's called partnership dollars. And so they're paying about 40% of this cost of this service. So we're very excited to have that start on Monday. So that was a wonderful thing to start. And just to let people know, it's pretty darn easy to use. You just need to go to your basic app stores and whichever platform you're on, just type in Ride Longmont. The app will show up. You download the app. You basically sign up for the service. And then you book your ride. And then you may have to walk a block or two to pick up your ride. It's just to make it simpler for the whole app. And that'll come through here as well. So about Ride Longmont, what is it? We talked a lot about that already. When can I ride? So it really is a Monday through Saturday service from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So it does turn off at 8 p.m. So I used it today, but I needed to go back and get my car for tonight's meeting just in case. So, but it turns out I probably could have made it. Sundays, 9 to 5 p.m. So it does reduce a little bit on Sundays. And we're working with all those different things. I know there's been some issues with how the timing works for this. And we're certainly, it's a flexible system. So we just need to see when people are riding it in our city. And then we can make it flexible. We can change it around based on what we hear. How much does it cost? So $2 for a typical ride for somebody. But if you're 18 or under, or 65 and older, or if you have a disability, that price is cut in half. So it'd be a $1 fare for those folks. How do you pay? You basically create that account that we talked about on the app. There's also ways that you can call a phone number, and they can work with you in any language you want. But you'll call the phone number, and they'll work with you as far as setting up the ride for you, the pickup and drop off through a phone call. So you don't have to be dependent on just a smartphone to use it. And then, can you book a ride in advance? This is really meant to be more of an immediate on-demand system. So we're really asking people that do the rides in advance piece that they please use the Flex Ride, because that's really a subscription service. And though it doesn't work well for when you need a ride immediately, it does really work well for subscription services, especially for students. So we're asking people to use the Flex Ride that is offered by RTD on that. And then why do I have to walk to meet my driver? We really want to cut down on those detours and the routing through. So we're really asking you to walk just a short distance to get to not a main, but an intersection of some kind, so the driver has an easy way of picking you up and getting back on their route. Who will I be sharing a ride with? Well, if there are other passengers heading in the same direction, you may be picked up, and they may be picked up with you. And I've had a couple of those shared rides. It's one other person with you, so it's not too bad at all. It's everybody's kind of talking to each other in the van too, so it's kind of nice. But it is something you have to think about if you don't, if you're not comfortable in that situation. You have to think that through, and also children. We're talking about younger children too. Anybody 13 years or older can ride by themselves technically within the state of Colorado, but it is going to be up to the parent or guardian on whether that happens or not. So we need to be cognizant of that as well. And then our wheelchair accessible vans available, WAVs. or wheelchair accessible vehicles. And yes, there are 2 of our fleet of 6. So we got 6 total cars. We've got 4 that have bike racks on them. So in the app, if you do request the idea that you want a bicycle, you can do that. If you always use a wheelchair, you can select that you're a user of wheelchair always. And so every one of your rides that you request, we'll make sure that we get the van accessible vehicle for that. More about the Ride Longmont kind of area of service. We've taken the municipal boundary and gone just a step beyond into our planning area boundary. And so that's the line that you see around the city there. It includes all the unincorporated parts of Boulder County that we have the enclaves. So we didn't want to exclude anybody from the system and have people jump over different parts of the city. So we're trying to serve the entire city there. And you can see the various places that we do serve. It's a lot of the high schools. We wanted to make sure we got those on there so people understood that. The Front Range Community College, the rec centers, the different high schools again, and then the Innovation Center. And one thing to point out is the Mobility Hub that's new out at Firestone and what's called the Firestone Longmont Mobility Hub at 119 and I-25. That now serves the Mustang service. You've probably been by there and see that it's been rebuilt. And so that larger mobility hub done by CDOT, I need to make sure that I make that caveat, is that's a CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation facility. That service with the Mustang is available to us as citizens, so we can get out there if we need to and come back if it's before. They're going to extend the hours out there for the last bus, so if you're on that last bus, you will get home using the system if you need. So we're just asking, please ride Longmont. I really appreciated all the work that the city council members did to get that word out. So thank you very much to a number of you who really took the time to make sure this word got out. Great press in the newspaper. I think our vendor, who is via the other VIA we call them, not via mobility that's in Boulder County, but via the transportation services that's kind of worldwide. They were very impressed with our smaller city of 100,000 people really going to get a lot of folks. We already have 500 people signed up for the app, and that's more than they really expected. And we've kind of started out slow. Yesterday we had about 30 rides total, or 30 people served, I should say. And then today we've doubled that. So if we can keep doubling it, that'd be great. So I'm certainly available for any questions if you'd like. But thank you.
Do we have any questions from counselors? Seeing none, I have to say, whoops, Counselor Yarbrough.
Hey, Phil, how much is a gallon of gas?
Well, depends on where you go, right? But it's almost $3, right?
How much is a cup of coffee?
I don't like coffee, but I think it's $3.50.
Right. So what you're telling me is that I can get a ride all the way from Hoover to UC Health for $2.
Unless you qualify for a discount, then it's only $1.
What you
yes.
trying to say? I look older than 65?
Nope.
No. No, I think it's a good deal. Thanks for all that you have done to make sure to get this kicked off. So, and all the staff who participated in this and worked really hard on it. So thank you.
Counselor Christ.
Do you happen to have the phone number to call for the ride?
Let's see. I do on my phone, I think.
I just have people that don't have smartphones.
970, I know. So, yeah, that's a little out of...
I don't think we really concentrated on that part of it.
970-538-9097.
And that is on the back of these vehicles as well.
Yeah, and you'll see those through town, so it's nice to see the vans kind of moving through town. It's been exciting to watch the whole thing kind of progress.
Correct. Counselor, Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring.
Thank you, Mayor. So, yeah, I actually do have a couple of questions. I shared this with members in the school district. We often have students who miss their bus and they are either absent. I've had a student whose parents would send an Uber. And it's like, that's a lot of money. for missing the bus. So, and you had mentioned that 13 to 17, they can ride with parent permission. There were some questions that were asked about under the age of 13 with parent permission.
Technically, because of the rules of the state of Colorado, technically they cannot ride alone under 13 years old. But yeah, I
Okay.
don't know how that works.
And so then my second question, my follow-up question, because I did have a follow-up to that in case that was, the answer was no. If the parents rode with them to school and did a turnaround, could that still count as that one trip? Or would it have to be considered 2 trips?
No, unfortunately, you do have to count that. We do count that as 2 trips.
Got
So you
it.
do have to take the vehicle to the school, and we've had this happen a lot already, where the parents are just trying it out with the kids and just seeing how it works. They've been
Okay,
very excited
good.
about this as well.
Yes.
So they're doing the trip from home to school, and then they'll get out, basically request a ride, and it's usually the same person, right? So they just go across the street, or they sit there and they just walk over to the van again after
Got
they
it.
let their kids off. So yeah, there's a way to do it, but it has to be 2 separate trips.
2 separate trips, okay. Yeah, I mean, in the event of missing a bus, it's not a daily occurrence, so I'm sure that's could be fine. And then the other piece, I did see that there's a drop-off or a station at Skyline. And is that, what was that? Is that a drop-off? Is that a,
Well, from the map,
from,
we're-
yeah,
we're
go
really-
back to the map.
We're really just trying to identify places we're just trying to identify locations that are key destinations for most of our people in the city.
Got
That
it.
aren't named with a brand name. So we show Skyline on there, we show Longmont High School, and we show Silver Creek. We also show the
Okay.
Innovation Center, and we
Yeah.
show New Meridian High School. So we're trying to show these places that we think kids will go, but it's not to say that those are the drop-off locations or the pickup points. That's to
Yeah.
say that the whole city's included and these places are included.
So, yeah, and I think, we do get a lot of residents going to Walmart, so that, somewhere further north, that might be, just something to kind of keep an eye on. And the youth center, which is close to, it is close to Skyline, but, if youth are getting dropped off,
So,
And we've made
popular.
a major effort to get information out to the youth center.
Perfect.
And unfortunately, we can't get into the high schools without having an electronic copy, so we're working on a way to get into the school system as well. But that's
Okay.
going to be you helping
Yeah.
us out with that. Thanks.
Already have
so just to
ideas.
clarify, there are no fixed stops,
Okay.
like a bus stop.
Yeah.
You can go anywhere you want within the city, but these, looking at future uses, these may be the most used routes, is what we are anticipating.
We're just trying to say that
Yeah.
these are great
But-
destinations within the city that people should think about. If you're using
Right.
any of these destinations as part of your trip, think about using this as getting there. I know parking has come up a number of times in a number of these places
Right.
during my career here. So it's always good to say, if you're having a problem with any kind of parking, we talk about downtown, and we've had issues with, perceived issues, I think, of parking. And so use this service to not have to find a parking spot and just
Right.
get to your job or your school or your appointments.
It's just another way to address all the traffic in our city. Thank you so much. This is really a step forward in
Thank you.
helping our
Thank you again.
residents. How do I get out of here? I need to get out of this presentation and go back to my screen because we're going to have public invited to be heard next. But I do have a statement written on that screen. Come on. Okay. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Oh dear, it didn't come up. So before we have public invited to be heard, I would like to make a short statement. I think that there was some misinterpretation on last week's meeting that Councilor Martin was going to leave after the December 3rd meeting. But that timeline by council was only to have her come back in person if she was going to continue to be on council. We had just removed the remote control, remote virtual attendance. So as you can see, Councilor Martin is here in person. And the reason I'm saying this is that I've had a lot of emails forwarded to me about a special election. According to our charter, which we have to follow, she is still on council but will leave as of December 31st. So that does not trigger a special election. Per our council, that triggers an appointment. So if anybody's here wanting to say we need a special election, per our charter, we cannot do that. So with that, I'm just going to open up again, public first call, public invited to be heard, and Lance Whitaker is first on the list.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. My name is frog in the throat there.
Your name's Frog in the Throat?
Yeah, most time. Lance Whitaker, 1750 Collier Street, Longmont, Colorado. Lived here 45 years now, 46. Various different spots in Longmont. I'd like to mention today, Mayor and Council, today is one of my girlfriend's favorite national days, and that's National Lager Day. So everybody go out and have beer, not on me. Everybody also remember that there is a Dewey Decimal System, because today is also National Dewey Decimal System. And shout out to all the libraries out there. Thank you for giving us a great system of filing. That should be about it. And Yarborough, you can come over to my house and have a cup of coffee for free anytime, along with the mayor and any of the other council members. I'll be more than happy to serve you up a cup of coffee for free. And you all know my address. So have a nice day.
Thank you, Lance. The next one on the agenda is Vic Pizzo.
Hi, thanks, Governor,
Why, thank you.
well, I'm getting ahead of myself, yeah. But anyway, Mayor Peck, for clarifying this, how you are viewing this situation. But I want to make sure that the city council understands that this doesn't look this way from from the outside. We were told very, I don't know, not in a total promise way, but it was stated that Councilwoman Martin would be leaving on the 2nd or 3rd, something like that, and that there would then possibly be election or whatever after that. Well, that's now all precluded. Now, this is one thing I want to really impress upon you. There's ancient Romans had this picture of something called opportunity. As a woman with this big knot of hair on her head, and she'd run by real fast. She was like an Olympic runner, and you either grabbed it or you didn't. If you missed it, you're out of luck. And credibility is a lot like that. And you are jeopardizing credibility with these kind of situations here. Now, it may be legal and all that, but it just doesn't seem right. And I think you people need to be thinking about that. People are getting really upset about this kind of stuff because it comes across as underhanded. You need to know that. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Bob Colts.
Yeah, that was the issue that I was going to speak about. But my name's Bob Colts, and I'm a resident of Longmont, and I was going to request that City Council...
I'm sorry, Bob, would you mind giving us your address, please?
It's 526 Abbey Drive.
Thank you.
so that was going to be my request, that city council, the member position vacated by Marcia Martin would be determined by special election as opposed to an appointment. And the reason is I believe this gives the people of Longmont the best option for exercising the democratic process and filling the position. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Greg Morrison? Or Morrissey?
Morrissey.
Morrissey.
Greg Morrissey at 1648 Harvard Street
Thank
here in
you.
Longmont. And what the last gentleman just said, I thought too. I thought, look at the process, and I read through all the documents. When Marcia was going to be leaving, there's going to be an election. And there should be an election. Perhaps that I need some direction there to show to I understand the whole thing critical, because I agree with him. The people in that part of the city need to get out and vote and have their voice heard. I think that's very important, what's going forward. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Altschuler?
Good evening. Steve Altschuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. I want to talk about this also. For one thing, I would like to throw my hat in the ring to be considered to take the position for Marcia Martin. I do live in Ward 2. With the last election that we actually did have, I was the next highest vote getter of people that ran for office. So I think that would be a reasonable claim on my part to be appointed to the position, since that was a vote of the people. I want to point out kind of what they were saying also about transparency, because I was here July 23rd when there was over a half-hour discussion about whether there should be an election or whether there should be an appointment and how this should be operated. The city council went to great lengths to look at the calendar. There's probably a 15-minute discussion about which date can we give Marcia the final time to decide if she will be on the board, on the council or not, and not have to do an election. So this is not just happenstance. This was all prearranged in great detail so that there would be no free election and the city council could actually do an appointment. And I don't think that's right. I think that's very underhanded. I don't think that's fair to the city. The other thing, no matter what you end up doing, I think it's imperative that the city council look at this entire situation and make a plan for the future. So kind of like if you're in school, if you miss more than 3 classes in 10 weeks, they can kick you out. So maybe you say if you have more than 3 missed meetings in 3 months, then you get a warning. And if you miss 3 more in the next 3 months, then you have to step away from the city council. I understand this is pretty much the first time this has come up, but it could come up again. And I think there needs to be some specific rules in place so people know how to deal with it. And it's not just up to that current city council at the time to make the arrangement for anything they want to make. So by July 23rd, and I don't remember the exact number of times, but Marcia had missed a lot of times. And by the way, we do all hope your daughter is much better. But there have been times that were on Zoom or she hadn't been here, and that was what brought the discussion up in the first place. So I think it's important that the city council make laws for how to deal with an excessive number of absences in the future. And again, I'd like to put my hat in the ring, and I'd be glad to meet with any or all of you and have discussions so you can see if I'm what you would think would be correct. Thank you.
So this is for everybody. So agenda item number D is going to have the discussion and the process going forward. So if you have the staying power, you can stay for that discussion.
Well, I didn't know how.
Item C.
I didn't know what that discussion would be, if that was just about tonight.
No.
Or putting your hat in the ring,
It's
or
about
what
the
it was.
process.
Okay.
So hang in there.
Cool.
Okay. Peggy Altschuler.
I'm Peggy Altschuler, 1555 Taylor Mountain Drive, and I'm going to sound like a broken record because I'm here to say the similar things as those that have come before me, but I do strongly believe it's of utmost importance that the people of Longmont have a choice in the matter on our city council members. I did spend a lot of time yesterday going through the July 23rd meeting, and there was a lot of discussion. 3 of the council members wanted to make sure that that date was set so that there could be a special election. 3 out of the 4 in attendance. 2 of the 4 were concerned that the Ward 2 had not had a vote outside of Marcia Martin, at no fault of her own. She ran independently in 2021. So in 7 years, there has not been an opportunity, other than that, for Ward 2 to have a choice. And it is really important that the people of Longmont get to choose their representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Scott Stewart. Thank you, Scott. Gary Hodges.
Thank you, Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. Good evening, Mayor, council members. So tonight I'm also here to speak about the likely upcoming council appointment. Everybody's referenced the July 23rd meeting. My notes have a meeting on the July 16th pre-session meeting. So maybe I'm wrong on that date, but it was at that meeting or after that meeting where we all believed that this situation had at least been resolved so as to ensure a special election. That's certainly the impression I came away with at that time. But here we are staring down an appointment. Well, it won't come as a surprise, but many in Longmont believe they are not well represented by the current council. It's against this reality that I'm framing my comments here tonight. So I'd like to challenge council by challenging each of you to consider appointing a person who won't merely bolster an already solid council majority. So recall at that previous meeting, there were several council members who spoke against the idea of an appointment, primarily because of the credibility hit council would take, and I think they were right to be concerned about that. So I would offer that appointing a person with an alternative mix of political views than the current majority is not going to change the outcome of any votes, but it will be seen as a credible selection. So ideally, individuals considered will be active participants in our city. This might come by engaging in city activities or operating a small business, property ownership, or maybe providing housing through rental properties. So there's a number of ways someone might demonstrate this. And considering all of this, I suggest Steve Altschuler is an excellent candidate to fill this position. So he checks numerous boxes, and no one would be able to accuse this council of appointing a person who is aligned with the prevailing makeup. It would also be an equitable move that gives voice to so many in this city who are often sidelined in discussions and decisions. So those are my comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Kathy Reeves.
Hello, I'm Kathy Reeves, 2217 Piccadilly Circle in Longmont. Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'd like to address the same situation. It's my understanding that a council member may attend meetings remotely as needed as long as he or she has an intent to return, according to your own rules. When it became clear in July of this year that Councilwoman Martin may not be returning to Longmont in a timely manner, this condition no longer applied to her. I believe it was stated at that time she was either considering or had already signed a 13-month lease in New York. For Councilwoman Martin to delay until now to resign, knowing full well that she would be preventing an election, was not in the best interests of the people. Based on the discussion of July 23rd, she knew that she would not be completing her term of office well before the one-year deadline, because it was made clear. December 2nd, if she were to resign by then, there would be an election. December 3rd, no, it would be an appointment. So everyone knew that. 3 council members made it clear at the July meeting that they would like to see an election of the new council person rather than an appointment. An election is in the best interests of citizens of Ward 2, of which I am one, and is what we are requesting tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. I just want to make a statement about the pre-sessions. Those are, we do not make policy, we do not take a vote. It is a way for council can just sit and discuss issues without going against the Sunshine Law. You can attend, but we don't make any policy or give direction or have votes at those pre-sessions. So moving on, I'm going to close public invited to be heard since there's no one else on the list, and we are going to go to study session items. The first one is a zero reading for a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 6.40 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adding Section 6.40.40 through 6.40.100 concerning hotel licenses. Do we have anybody to speak to this? Yes, we do.
Which one is it? I can't see.
The right one, there you go.
That one?
Mayor, City Council, staff, thanks. I am Assistant Chief Maltrude. We would like to present the hotel motel ordinance. A little background is this started a couple years ago when we started noticing that we had an uptick in calls for service to some of our local hotels. During that uptick, we were seeing a lot of criminal activity, a lot of drug activity, and we had very little resources that we could do to deal with that. Through that, we executed some search warrants, and as a result, we worked with some state law and with our county partners to shut a couple of our hotels down so that we could get some remediation done and work through some issues with them to get some of our calls for service lowered. And as a result, you'll see through some of the stats that Officer Kennedy will show you that we had some positive results. As a result, we looked at some options we could do to spread this process around to affect all of our hotels so we could lower our calls for service, create a safer environment for our travelers that come into our community. And as a result, we'd like to present to you guys a ordinance that hopefully will create a safer environment for our travelers and a safer environment for our community.
Much shorter. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Elizabeth Lorena Mills, one of your senior assistant city attorneys. And what we've brought to you today for consideration is a zero reading on an ordinance for your feedback. Do you want us to proceed? And if so, what should we do? And we looked at neighboring municipalities in the Front Range and Denver metro area where how do we address these hotel motels that are disproportionately using calls for service. And so what this ordinance does is has an enforcement mechanism. It is tied to the calls for service that they are generating to the police for police services. And it is specific to criminal calls. So if somebody is staying at the Hampton Inn and they have a medical emergency, that does not count. Now, if they have an overdose and there's been illegal drug activity, that would count. So we're balancing people legitimately need medical calls for service and versus things that are generating a police law enforcement response. And what we're proposing in this ordinance is an implementation timeline so that every motel and hotel in the city can come into compliance and be bring down their calls for service and have it graduated and give them time to generate that. It would be an annual licensing requirement. It would be done through our city clerk's office, and our police department would be reviewing the applications to to see what are their calls for service and are they participating in our crime-free hotel motel program. We have a voluntary program right now that we'll hear a little bit more about that is generating real positives for the community. And there are other things that their expertise would share with the hotel motels that helps bring down their calls for service and make it a safe environment for everyone who's in Longmont, whether short-term or long-term. Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. David Kennedy, Neighborhood Resource Officer with Public Safety. So the data that you're looking at here is a 6-month window in time, comparing what these two properties looked like before and after working with these two properties in the crime-free program. So what you see there is a comparison in data between 2022 and 2024. And the reason that we jump back to 2022 to compare data is because back in 2023, if you remember, is when the two hotels were shut down due to meth contamination. I believe the Super 8 was shut down in October and Lamplighter in May. So as you can see, there's been a significant reduction in police calls for service since that time when we compare those two 6-month data sets. About 43% at the Super 8 and 78% decrease in calls at the Lamplighter. So what happened in 2023 is during the closing of those properties, Chief Maltrud, Sarah Arney, and myself, and some other public safety staff sat down with the ownership and management of these two properties. And what we proposed at the time is we proposed that, we already had up and running now for over a decade in the city of Longmont, a crime-free program, which was working with the rental housing community. And it had also been very successful at decreasing police calls for service over that last decade. And so the proposal was to roll out a similar in nature program with the hotel motel industry with the hopes that it would decrease calls for service. So the 24 data that you're looking at is a complete picture of time in which we have been working with those two properties. Both these the ownership at Lamplighter and the management of both of these hotels both agreed to work with that program. And since that time, every time there's a police, fire, or code enforcement call or animal control call at the property, what my job is now is to communicate what exactly that was in nature to the management, so they're number one aware, and if there is a problem that needs correction, they can go ahead and have that guest move out, and you can see the decreasing result. I would like to bring council's attention to that 80 number there on the Super 8, the 80 calls for service number. What that number is what I like to call a raw number. So when we run our dispatching CAD data and I run those two dates, that's the raw police calls for service. And in other words, we've responded 80 times in that 6-month period. But one thing that public safety really felt was not fair is that we understand as an agency that not every time the police go to a property is it necessarily a negative generator, right? There's actually positive generators on occasion when the police are there. And so nothing about this proposed ordinance would be something that we're interested in trying to deter or discourage anyone who's in management, ownership, or even a guest from calling the police when they do need help. Maybe a good example I could think of a call for service we would exclude would be, say, a medical call. Say a guest at a hotel room is having a heart attack. Why would we ever consider that as part of this ordinance, right? Current dispatching protocols, they do send a police officer to every heart attack call because sometimes the police car is closer, right? We can start life-saving measures until fire arrives. So that, just looking at that one call, we would now take that 80 number and reduce it down to 79. So I did that for all 80 of those calls for service. And from that 80, the reduction, it actually went down to 43 calls for service that were actually crime-related. And what that did is that puts their current calls for service ratio at 1.3 calls for service per room per calendar year. If we were to extrapolate this 6 months of data into a year, by just assuming that 6 months of data set would look very similar over the next, 6 months and, go from 80 to 160 calls for service. When I ran the numbers for the Lamplighter following the same methodology, their current calls for service rate is sitting at 2.4 calls for service per room per calendar year. We did run another hotel, one that's traditionally, since it's been built, has really not been a high generator of public safety calls. I ran data for the Hilton Garden Inn, which is located near the intersection of Kemprat Boulevard and South Martin Street. The Hilton Garden Room has 105 rooms. They had 49 police calls for service. Once again, I went through all that data, reduced that down to 33 calls for service, which comes out to 0.31 calls for service per calendar year. And that was from a 2023 data set because that contained a full year data. So the current ordinance, what it's proposing is setting our ordinance at 1.5 calls per service per room per calendar year. And that number came from other municipalities, and so really the question is that a number that we could work with? And that's why I ran these numbers. Right now, it looks like the only hotel that currently is going to be over that 1.5 threshold would be the Lamplighter. However, as you can see, they've already reduced calls 78%. And honestly, Sarah and I's experience in the crime-free program is, this is something that does take a little bit of time. And the hope is that with more time, we can get them there as well. So with that, I'll pass it on to Sarah, who's going to talk a little bit more about the crime-free program.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, Sarah Arney, Neighborhood Resource Officer with Public Safety. We wanted to wrap this back around for you relating to the crime-free housing program and the success that has been ongoing in our community since 2010. Because really the crime-free housing program is just a small segment of the crime-free program to begin with. We've worked with other municipalities, as Dave said. Once we knew we had an issue here and Chief Maltrud brought this to all of our attention, I basically brought up, I said, hey, we work very closely with Lakewood Police Department. They run this program. We went down, visited them, did some homework and brought this back. And so this is why we're here today. But we wanted to bring to you the fact that, we do have reduced calls for service. This brings community collaboration. What we are not doing right now is that the pilot program is only providing them information. They're just getting the calls. With the full pledge or full bore program, I should say, they're going to get staff training, which we do in the housing program, right? We're going to do a security assessment or a SEPTED evaluation of all the hotels, and that I think will even bolster those numbers that Dave just brought up to you. So the ordinance highlights no application fee at this point unless we're given other direction. And then Officer Kennedy just spoke to you about the calls for service rate, and right now it's set at 1.8 to allow them to come into compliance and eventually go to 1.5. And they already discussed with you the medical calls and that nature. And, we do see the traffic citations where the property address is used. We often pull people over in these places. So we'll have to go through that data and ensure that those don't count. So council direction, option 1, direct staff to bring back the ordinance as originally proposed today for the first reading. Option 2, bring it back with council's recommended changes today for the first reading. And option 3 is we do not proceed. Any questions?
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to council for questions or comments. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Is there any room for some discretion in the sense, as you already enumerated, like Lamplighter is down 78%, which is statistically a significant margin, right? And I think part of it is that they have a much more limited number of rooms as compared to some of our other facilities, right? And so I was just wondering if there's any wiggle room when you're working with somebody who at this time seems very willing to try to get everything under control, as we go forward, or is this just going to be a hard stop?
So I think the idea behind setting it at a per room basis hopefully addresses some of those. Certainly not all. I do understand your point. But by keeping it per room, like we look at the Lamplighter, it only has 23 rooms, and you compare that to the Hilton of over 100 rooms, right? It wouldn't be fair to just say put a blanket call for service on each property, because the only way we could really make it fair was to do a per room. Right. So kind of held everybody to the same.
I think
Oh. One of the intentions is it's to be a collaborative process. So we are providing that if they are working with the crime-free housing program and they're moving in the right direction and taking seriously the recommendations, it isn't a, city clerk shall pull the license. There is discretion to allow those businesses that are working on the program to keep in compliance, as long as they're working on it.
Okay, that's exactly what I was kind of trying to get at. And then one other question I had was, there was a list of the calls for service that would constitute being counted, right? And some of them I thought were maybe a little on the margins, such as if a fight happens on the sidewalk adjacent to a hotel, that one of the people in the fight may be a guest of the hotel, and maybe the other party is not. This comes to mind, for instance, in areas where there are late night establishments. Such a one example would be, say, I think it's called the Candlelight, and it's right next to the Buffalo Wild Wings, which is one of the later opened establishments in town. And there's not necessarily all the time, but there happens to be fights in the parking lot and adjacent, could be on that property. And so I was just wondering, will there also maybe be some discretion as far as, like, it's not something that could really be in the management's control necessarily, but it still happens on their property?
Yeah, one thing I noticed when I was looking at the data, because it really does require, if somebody is beyond the 1.5 when we run that initial just raw number, that's going to require a staff member to actually go in and physically look at every police call for service, because you're absolutely right. And I'll just use the Hilton Garden Inn as an example. So they back up to the St. Vrain Greenway. And so a lot of those calls that I was excluding from the property as counting against the property, if you will, were calls for service that had nothing to do with the actual property itself. It was problems that were occurring on the Greenway. The reason dispatch uses the address is because the Greenway doesn't have an address, right? And so what they do is they just use the closest physical address to wherever that call for service is, and it just so happens to be that there's a hotel sitting there right next to the Greenway, right? So, yeah, it could look, on its face like something serious happened. It'll show their address. It'll show there was an assault that occurred and somebody got arrested, but it has nothing to do with the hotel. So that's why it's going to be very important for staff, if we do go over that threshold, then they're going to have to do a review of every police call for service and then come up with a true picture. Because if they do get called in for a hearing, then it's going to be incumbent upon that officer to show proof in every one of those calls this was related to the property, and not just some, extraneous thing, that happened elsewhere and just happened to fall on this address.
Okay.
Yep.
And we also see that currently with the data that we have for the crime-free housing program. A lot of times, an incident could happen in the parking lot, an incident could happen, a traffic accident, right? So we go through that data as well, and that is where, management, there's nothing they can do with that, right? For the most part, so.
Okay. Thank you. I would say that, just kind of to my fellow council members as well, just to wrap it up so I don't have to make any more comments on this item, that I really did actually appreciate starting with the no application fee, especially because we have a number of establishments, and I think, it will create more goodwill with them in the beginning stages of this program. And having my questions answered on the calls for service ratio, if you will, really helped me push me towards supporting moving this forward. So with that, back to you.
Great. So what you're basically saying is that you would like them to move forward with this?
That's mine.
That's yours. Okay. Okay, and you went down. I have one question. When you were discussing this, did you discuss the possibility that perhaps a hotel will stop calling for service with the fear of having their license revoked, so that you end up with less calls? They look good, but they really needed to call.
So, Madam Mayor, one of the things that we realized when we started communicating with Super 8 and the Lamplighter was the first thing that we got from the owners or from corporate from Super 8 was, we didn't know this was going on.
Oh.
And I think the big thing is not that the calls for service are being reported, is opening that line of communication.
Okay.
And with Crime Free, what ends up happening is they're now communicating directly with corporate and the direct manager of Super 8. The owner of Lamplighter doesn't live in Longmont anymore. She now gets a copy of what's going on at her hotel.
Okay.
And this now, this isn't, what we tried to create with this wasn't an us versus them mentality. This was a, how can we work on this collaboratively together and open up that line of communication? And this is what's going on your property. If you engage with us, we're not trying to count we're not the bean counters to say, oh, you're 1.51 over. It's okay, you're reaching this threshold because these people are also causing damages to your property. They're lowering because no one wants to stay at that property where it's the problem property.
Correct.
Where you collaborate with us through crime-free assessment of your property, through working with us on how we can work through some of these problem tenants. We can make your property more inviting for people to come to. It lowers our calls for service. It helps put our officers back out on the street doing the things that they need to be doing. It helps everybody involved. And that's where we looked at this ordinance and how this can be beneficial to everybody, not just a punitive measure. So I think that's where the benefit really comes in on this is it doesn't cause them to, hey, don't call us, because what we're going to know, what we know is in the beginning, we're probably going to see a little increase as they're trying to work through how we deal with these problems. And then as we work with them and give them some more skills on how to deal with it, then we start seeing that drop in the calls for service and we get them to where they need to be. It's more, are you engaging with us and working to get that taken care of, or are you ignoring that problem and it's now getting to this 78% that we got to deal with?
Okay.
So that's what we're looking for.
Well, anything that makes our city safer, I'm in for. So I would agree with Councilor Rodriguez. Councilor McCoy. Oh, Martin, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just wanted to clarify too that the call for service does not have to come from the hotel management. The call for service is typically going to come from a guest, right? Or somebody interacting with a guest. And the program just gets around to the hotel management, which it otherwise might not do, and they wouldn't have known. Because I heard it stated a different way, or possibly another way, and I just want to clarify that. But that's how it works, correct?
Correct, just like our crime-free housing program.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
And jumping in from the crime-free housing program, we're obviously part of that with the Housing Authority. And so, yes, 99% of the calls are actually driven by residents. We get the reports, and then we work with the crime-free in terms of what we need to do. And I think the numbers, when we talked about this program, really mimic that.
Right. So it's closing the loop, making sure the loop gets closed.
Correct.
Thank you.
But Sarah, your comments about the fact that management did not even know this was going on, I think was very pertinent. It wasn't you, Sarah, sorry.
It was the ownership. The ownership didn't know that was going on. So closing that loop, because they can't come in and fix it. If they got a bad manager, and that was part of the problem with Lamplighters, they had issues with their management, and she didn't know, and that's a huge reduction in the calls for services. They got a manager there that's now a manager.
Exactly, and that
helps.
And I was familiar with that, so that was the point of my question, is that. So thanks for giving me the higher picture. I agree that I would like you to go forward. How about other counselors? Do we have do you just want to start with Counselor Yarbrough? You're a yes to go forward? Option one.
Option one.
One.
Oh, yes. Okay.
You have your direction. We all would like you, option one.
Great. And just so you all know, we've been in communication with Sarah with Visit Longmont regarding,
okay.
And so I met with her several months ago and actually spoke with her again this morning. And there's opportunity to talk to the folks that are on her group, the group that she gathers.
Right.
So she's going to talk with them this week.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. All right, we are going to move on in our agenda.
You didn't come down just for this, did you?
So number B is a consideration of a council resolution establishing the fee for cash in lieu of water right transfers. And we have Ken Houston.
Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council members. My name is Ken Houston. I'm the Water Resources Manager, and also tonight, helping me back me up is we have Wes Lowry, our Senior Water Resources Analyst, as well as Roger Lang, Chair of our Water Board. Tonight, we wanted to bring before you our cash in lieu of water rights dedication program. We have a few small changes that is being proposed, and we wanted to bring that to council before we actually brought a resolution forward. Let me grab that. So really, the purpose tonight of our presentation, one is just to provide the public with a summary of what the cash in lieu fee is, and to summarize the history of that cash in lieu fee. Then we'd like to describe our current cash in lieu fee setting criteria, how what we're currently using to establish that fee. Then we'd also like to describe our cash in lieu fee process, or the methodology that's using. There are a couple of small changes in that methodology that we wanted to inform the council about, and then ask City Council for direction about that methodology. So first, we'd like to quickly describe the cash in lieu fee itself. Whenever a property annexes into the city of Longmont for development purposes, you're required through what's called the raw water requirement policy to provide the city with water for that development that will eventually go on that property. Currently, that's 3 acre-feet per acre of land that's annexed, and typically there are two facets of that. One is what's called the historical water, i.e. water that's on the land when it annexes. It's usually most of the property around Longus farmland. We get about 2 acre-feet of water, about 2/3 of that requirement in water that's historical. And then the other 1/3 of that, the development community normally brings in non-historical water. There are other water rights that are available that they could bring in. One of the things that historically, clear since the formation of the Water Board in 1963, we've had what's called the cash in lieu of water rights dedication. That's really an optional payment method for the development community in case they don't want to bring in non-historical water. In the past, honestly, it hasn't been used a whole lot. It wasn't used a whole lot because there was plenty of non-historical water. As we fast forward to today, there's less and less non-historical water out there available. So we are getting a little more cash in lieu of water rights just because it's difficult to get that. But it is a voluntary, so it's not required to do. So some of the uses of that fee, I'd like to go just to highlight real quickly both the historical uses of that fee that Longmont's put it to, and then some of our future uses. In the past, we use basically the cash in lieu fee is used to develop new water supply. So that's a pretty generic description. But there are a number of ways we have historically done this. We do it for water rights change cases to help pay the cost of water, both historical and non-historical. We use it for our water conservation programs, realizing that you can either get more water or you can save water. And so that works well for us. In the past, we've used it for acquisition of Union Reservoir, some of our original shares in that company. We currently own about 85% of that company at this point. We've used it in the past for the Windy Gap diversion project. I'll describe that in a minute here, as well as paying for the Windy Gap Firming Project cash financing. When we entered the Windy Gap Firming Project, we paid some cash up front, what we had, and then we also took out some bonds, and so we've had a couple years of bond payments for that. We've also in the past acquired different non-historical water rights, and then we've also acquired property around Union Reservoir for the eventual enlargement of Union Reservoir. That benefits, a number of benefits there. So we've used that cash and lieu fee for a number of different uses. What are we going to do in the future as we continue to get additional cash and lieu? It's kind of not an actual priority, but it's a rough priority. The first use of that will be to pay the Windy Gap Firming Project bond debt and water and continuation of our water conservation programs. We want to make sure that bond debt for the Windy Gap Firming Project is paid through, not through water rates, but through there's really two areas. One is the Windy Gap surcharge on tap sales, and another on the cash and lieu. We will also continue to use it for water rights change cases, acquisition for future water, property acquisition for future water supplies, as well as three future projects. One is Union Reservoir Pumpback Pipeline. That's one of our future water supplies. Union Reservoir Enlargement, which is one of our future water supplies, as well as an occasional water right acquisition. Actually, water right acquisition isn't our primary purpose for that fee, primarily because Longmont's had a long-standing guiding water principle of not going out and trying to buy and dry the farms around town. That's part of our community is the agricultural farmlands around the community. So, so just real quickly, how have we based the criteria for setting the cash and lieu fee? For many years, from 1963 till 2012, the fee was primarily based upon acquisition costs of Colorado Big Thompson units. Partially because we have acquired some of those units over the year, but also it's got a really good market, so it was really easy to track. That worked real well for a lot of years. Unfortunately, in the early 2000s, more and more demand on that project occurred, so a lot more of the units were being acquired by other water providers, as well as the fact that as more and more of those units are acquired, there's fewer units that are available, and so the price went up. In 2000, you could buy it for in the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 range. Within 10 years, it was up in the $50,000, $60,000 range. So what happened for Longmont when we were looking at that price in 2012 is both Water Board and City Council said, that's starting to get away from us. And we knew at that time we wouldn't be acquiring any additional CBT. So working with City Council, the Water Board came up with a fee that basically from 2013 to 21, we based our fee on the development of new water supply projects. And that was a litany of some projects, some of our future planned projects, but also at the time, the Windy Gap Firming Project, but it was the Windy Gap Firming Project alone. In 2021, Council asked staff and Water Board to review that criteria again because it was only the firming project, not the entire Windy Gap project. So in 2022, Council adopted a fee methodology that utilized the entire Windy Gap project. And the Windy Gap project really consists of the original parent project, which was a pumping plant, reservoir, and pipeline on the west slope to provide us the water rights, and then the Windy Gap Firming Project, which was the project to store the water and firm that up. So historically, the city of Longmont since 1963 has received about $19 million in cash in lieu. More of that has been recent because of less non-historical water. Right now, we're acquiring about $1 million a year, and that's fairly variable. As you know, development is variable. So what I wanted to do is, just for the benefit of those who aren't familiar with how those two projects, the parent project and the Firming project, is describe both of those projects. The Windy Gap pumping project, the original project, actually Longmont's mayor, Ralph Price, went over the West Slope and filed for that water right in 1967. In 1969, 6 of the Northern Front Range cities went together, formed a sub-district through the Northern Water District, worked on that project and finally broke construction in 1981, finished it in 1985. At that point, we had a viable pumping project. Longmont took its first deliveries of the Windy Gap water in 85, and then it was issued a 30-year bond, the project did, and that was actually paid off in 2016. Then the other half of that project is the Windy Gap Firming project, which is basically the storage reservoir. This is a picture of the recent construction of that project. That project was implemented first in 1999 when we started looking at sites and started the federal permitting process. We got permits for that in 2014, 2017. In 2021, we settled all issues related to the permits and the construction and started construction, broke ground, and that project is scheduled to be completed in August of 2025. So we're getting really close. It's about a 350-foot tall dam, and we just did this week go over 300 feet. So it now is the tallest dam on the east slope of Colorado. There's a couple taller ones on the west, but that project is well on its way, and it's will be done this year. And we're really hoping that we'll be able to start putting water in it before the end of next year. So here's some of the specific cash in lieu considerations, process considerations. That Water Board, over the course of setting both the criteria and the methodology, did. The first was we looked at the fact that this is an impact fee. So Water Board worked closely with our city's legal department to make sure that the methodology we used tracks with state requirements state and federal requirements for impact fees, which it does, and we're pretty confident with that. Then we looked at evaluation criteria. What do we use? That's really where we came down to utilizing the Windy Gap project, both the parent project and the Firming project, as the criteria to set that fee. That is primarily because largest portion of the fee over the next 20 years will go to pay for the bonds for the Windy Gap Firming, and we have paid off the bonds for the parent project. And it's a really good project to use, and we have good data on all of it. Then jumping to the valuation methodology, we actually go to looking at the cost. For the parent project, there are occasional sales of the parent project allotment contracts. So the most recent sale was Platte River Power Authority, sold 5 units and did it on an open bid, and so that was a good competitive basis. And that's the criteria we'll be talking about tonight, and if council approves it, we'll come back in January with the actual resolution. That's on the parent project, and then the Windy Gap Firming project is simply the bid cost, the actual cost of constructing that project. So that's the methodology we use to calculate that fee. And so we wanted to talk about that a little bit. And then finally, wanted to talk a little bit about the timing of the fee adjustments. We always try to listen to what we're hearing from our constituents. One of the things we heard from some of the development communities was that it was hard for them to have a fee change at different times of the year and without a lot of forewarning. So we did work with Water Board to talk about that one issue, and that's really one of the issues we wanted to talk about today. We're proposing a different fee. So really, there's just 3 areas that we would like council input and direction on the cash in lieu fee tonight. The first is changing the cash in lieu fee only once a year. In the past, our city code says that Water Board will review at least on a quarterly basis the cash in lieu fee, and they do that, and they will continue to do that. What we are proposing to bring back to council in January with a resolution is basically Water Board will continue to review that quarterly, make sure there's nothing's getting out of whack, timing wise. But what we'd like to do is on the quarterly reviews are March, June, September, and December. And what we'd like to do is on the June quarterly report review, Water Board would make a recommendation to City Council for any change on the fee, that it would then come to council in the August, September time period. And then once council approves that change, we will actually have it effective on January 1st. That gives the development community, that gives other people about 6 months to get ready for that. It can be a little, for some developments, if they're large, it could be, it's not uncommon to have, a few hundred to $500,000 in a cash in lieu fee. That's over a lot of units, so it doesn't, per unit, it's not a huge fee, but it's still money. So that's kind of where we came down with. Some pros and cons on that. The one thing we do want to highlight is in the past, when fluctuations of water acquisition go up and down rapidly, such as happened with the CBT water in the early 2000s, it's hard to catch that. You kind of feel like you're behind. And with our current criteria of using the Windy Gap Fermi project, though, we actually don't think it'll probably be 2 years or so before there's a big change, because there aren't that many units in the parent project. And the Windy Gap Fermi project, as soon as we're done with construction, that price is set, and so that won't change at all. So we feel at this point that makes sense and gives the development community a little bit of time to think about that. The second question, I guess, would be always is the option of, is the current fee setting methodology that we use, both the criteria and the methodology, acceptable to council? It puts us in, the next bullet point is the actual price. It puts us around $60,000 an acre foot. So we're still a little bit lower than many of the Front Range water providers, but it's enough. And then finally, after review and using the methodology that we do use, the Windy Gap project, that current calculation would be $59,625. Our current cash in lieu fee is about $48,000, so it's a little bit larger increase than we normally get. We've only had one. In the past, we've only had one increase in that kind of range that has been that large of an increase. So we wanted to make sure council knew about that, rather than just bringing you a resolution and asking you to pass that large of an increase. We believe the Water Board's done an outstanding job of reviewing all the issues and really thinking this through, and we appreciate their effort and their time in doing that. So at this point, staff will plan on bringing back a resolution in January to set the cash in lieu fee, but wanted to open it up to council if you had any questions or any input beyond what we discussed tonight.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. While the development community may not love the increase, I know one thing that the development community would love is the concept of certainty. They generally can make a lot of things work as long as it's a certainty, right? And so I'm definitely pro going toward once a year evaluation, whether we raise it once a year or not. As you said, it could be static for a couple of years or so. We'll see how that goes as the market continues. And that will, because if there's uncertainty, as you can imagine, sometimes that'll make a developer go back to the drawing board. Adding time to the project, adding time to a project means adding a lot more cost to the project versus the certainty of the increase in the cash in lieu fee. As far as the methodology, I think it's very similar to what we had, and it still stands to reason as far as, you know, very logical and straightforward and fairly easy to calculate. And as far as the actual cash in lieu fee increase, as you stated, it's still below generally a lot of our neighboring communities, so I find that acceptable as well. So I'm happy to say that I support going forward as written.
Councilor Christ.
Mr. Houston, let me compliment you on your presentation. As I was thinking of questions, you were answering them real time, so I was very impressed with that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You don't get that often.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know how very considered this decision was for the water board. So I support all three, actually. I just have one general question, and you do feel that new fee of $59,000 is adequate for potentially the next 2 years, but you want to review it at the end of the year. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do feel it's adequate. Actually, what we feel is we're probably not going to see much of a change over the next couple of years. Water board will still continue to review it quarterly, and so we do have that assurance that if something happens in the interim, I believe water board and staff will recommend we come back and look at it. So it's, we're not setting once a year in code or anything like that, but that'll become our practice. But yeah, it is adequate. We believe it's adequate and will be adequate for a while, because I actually don't expect any sales of the parent project for another year or two. And the Windy Gap Firming project is very close to complete. So we hope we don't see any substantial increases in that. So we think we're doing good.
Okay, well, I support all three.
Seeing no one else, I support all three also, but putting this in layman terms from the questions I know I'm going to get, basically developers have to, when they have a development, they have to bring water into their development with the water rights that they own, if they own any water rights.
That is correct.
And
all of their historical water rights have to be dedicated, and then if it doesn't meet 3 acre feet, they have to provide that, and that's sufficient water for the development.
So the water in lieu, why am I saying that so stupidly? Is basically they are buying water from the city for their development then.
That is correct.
Okay. Very simply, that's what this does.
That's a simple
And
answer,
that
yeah.
is the cost of what the city pays for. It's under what the cost that the city pays.
Yes.
So, thank you. Hopefully we don't have a drought. So.
Yeah. We don't
And
want.
I agree with all three things. Agree. Okay, you have your direction.
Okay, thank you very much. We will return in January. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we are, and I see everybody has stayed. You haven't left for this discussion. So the next one is our city council candidate selection process and schedule for consideration. And I welcome Dawn Quintana, our city clerk. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'm just going to suggest a possible conflict of interest in this setting. I think that if we're picking a selection, getting this information, I think it would be reasonable to ask the Ward 2 council member to step aside.
So according to our rules of procedure, the council person can recuse themselves, or it can go to a vote of the majority vote of council. So do you want to address this, please, Councilor Martin?
Yes. I would not like to recuse myself because I can't imagine where my conflict of interest would fall, but I am interested in the discussion and would like to have a few words to say in defense of the council, who I feel has been unfairly represented by the public in the discussion so far. This discussion is about minute details of process that will not be undertaken until I'm no longer on the council. So it has nothing to do, I will have no say in the execution of the process, and I will certainly have no vote on the selection of the council. Therefore, I would like to sit here and listen, because I feel like asking me to leave the room somehow implies that I did something wrong. And a council member always has the right to resign when their circumstances force them to make a different decision. I love serving on the council, and I love Longmont, and it is the second worst thing, having to leave my seat early, that could have happened to me. And the reason that I'm leaving my seat early is the worst thing that could have happened to me. So one thing I would like to say is that the council has not been underhanded.
Councilor Martin, this is just a yes or no, so we can move on to the discussion.
Well, I won't recuse myself.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion to have it recused? I won't second one, but. Yep, we're going to wait a minute. So our city clerk will start the discussion when Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Farian comes back. And it'll be probably a pretty short discussion, but I think we'll hit all of the major points that we need to make. So maybe we should take a 5-minute break, all of us. We're gonna take a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hang in, it's just 5 minutes. We are back in session, and Dawn Quintana from the city clerk will start this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, members of council. Dawn Quintana, city clerk, here to talk to you about the city council vacancy and appointment process. Our goal tonight is to get direction from you on the procedure and the timeline for filling the Ward 2 vacancy by the deadline of January 30th, 2025. Before we do that, I know there are lots of questions. I anticipate the public would have lots of questions. So I just wanted to begin our conversation covering some of the facts and what the charter says. I put on this slide a lot of text. This is Charter 2.8.4. Just for public information, I'm going to focus on the first couple sentences because they're relevant to the information we're about to review. So a vacancy which occurs less than 1 year but more than 90 days before the next regular city election shall be filled by a majority vote of the remaining councilmen within 30 days after such vacancy occurs. When a vacancy occurs with 1 year or more remaining in a term, the council at the next regular meeting shall call a special election for the constituency for which the vacancy occurs. And I won't read all of it to you, but I want to focus on those two sentences. So our current scenario, the vacancy will occur on December 31st, 2024, as delivered in Councilmember Martin's resignation. Regular city election will be held, according to Charter 2.3, on the first Tuesday in November in each odd number year. Therefore, our next regular election will be November 4th, 2025. When we compare those two dates, we can see that there is less than 1 year and more than 90 days between those two. And then just a reminder of that sentence in the charter that says a vacancy that occurs less than 1 year and more than 90 days before the next regular city election shall be filled by a majority vote of the remaining councilmen within 30 days after such vacancy occurs. So I wanted to just cover those pieces of that for you and for the public. Has the council made appointments before? You certainly have. This body hasn't. It certainly hasn't occurred since I've been with the city clerk's office or even with the city. But there are 6 instances since the charter was adopted in 1961. Some of those names might sound familiar to you. Roger Lang was in the audience tonight, appointed in 2000 by the council. So there is a precedent. We did look to the process in 2005 and 2000. I was able to find those. And what I will present to you tonight is wash, rinse, repeat. I basically borrowed that layout to present to you tonight because it's been done twice before and worked well. So, and just a closer look at the past 2 appointments. In 2000, Rick Hogue resigned effective November 7th, 2000. That was less than a year from the regular election scheduled in November 2001. Roger Lang was then appointed to fill that seat. In 2005 was a Ward 2 issue. Greg Winger resigned effective January 4th, 2005, less than a year from the regular election in November 2005. And Karen Banker was appointed to fill that seat by the then seated council. Moving our focus to special elections, I do think there's some confusion about that, like you might have a choice or when one occurs over the other. So I wanted to take a moment to look at special elections. Looking back at Charter 2.8.4, when a vacancy occurs with 1 year or more remaining in a term, the council at the next regular meeting shall call a special election for the constituency for which the vacancy occurs. Looking back at the past couple special elections, in 2007, again, Roger Lang won the mayor's seat halfway into his at-large term. So there were 2 years left on his seat. We then ran a special election to fill that seat, and Gabe Santos was the winner of that election. In 2018, Brian Bagley won the mayor's seat halfway into his term as the Ward 1 representative. A special election was held in February 2018, and Councilmember Waters was the winner of that election. And there might be questions because 2021 and 22 was a little bit wild. When Mayor Peck was elected mayor in 2021, she had 2 years remaining on her at-large seat. Again, looking back at Charter 2.8.4, the council shall call a special election. As some of you may recall, maybe you all recall, we had numerous challenges with the scheduling of that special election. Neither of the counties were available, vendor unavailability, there were high cost, paper shortage. We're beginning to recover from the pandemic. But the council did ultimately set a special election in November 2022, and Councilmember McCoy was the person elected at that election to fill that seat, and then again ran for a full term. So I wanted to just clarify that in the past, it's not like you get to pick or choose which we're doing. It's based on each scenario, and the charter is directing us as to what we need to do every time. So I wanted to just pause there and see if you all had questions there. From the discussion, it sounds like you all are relatively clear, but I'm happy to pause.
Martin?
Yes, I don't have a question, and I won't be really participating much in this, but I do want to point out that as Dawn's history shows, special elections are fraught and uncertain, and you don't know how long it's going to be between the vacancy and the certification of the election. And so we've had occasions where a ward went unrepresented, or a seat went unrepresented for a significant amount of time. And the council appointments are really short intervals, and so I'm not sure I understand what the aversion is to accepting an appointment of a city council that you did, after all, elect.
Okay, you can continue. I see no other questions.
Thank you, Mayor. So our task at hand is how to accomplish an appointment by January 30th, 2025. So this is what the charter does not specify, how. So realistically, you could just pick someone and appoint them. The charter really doesn't say how you will arrive at an appointment. Or you could follow a process like one that you have followed before, or councils like you have followed prior. We did a little bit of searching. We looked at something off of the attorney listserv that came from, I believe, the city of Lafayette. That was very similar. Town of Windsor has done recent appointments, also very similar. So we felt like that process that has been followed before was a great option to bring forward. But truly, you could just choose somebody to appoint. It's not specified. We do suspect that a public process is what would be chosen by council, because it's more transparent and all of those great things that we like to see in local government. So the proposed overall public process in a big picture layout would be to announce the vacancy in the process. Applications are submitted by the defined deadline to the city clerk's office. City clerk would have the job to make sure each person meets the criteria, that they are residents of Longmont, et cetera, et cetera. Those meeting the criteria would be scheduled for a presentation and interview during an open meeting. Council would vote by ballot to make an appointment after this presentation interview process, and then we would swear that person in. I'm just going to keep going. We'll come back to questions. I think it might help to just keep going. If we dive in a little deeper, the interview process that was followed previously is what's on the screen. So each applicant that is deemed to qualify to meet the criteria to serve as councilman would have 5 minutes in an open meeting to provide a presentation to council, and the rest of the applicants would be sequestered during that time. After each applicant has given their 5-minute presentation, the council would vote by public ballot for no more than 3 applicants. The clerk would tally the ballots right there in that moment, and anyone receiving 3 or more votes would be asked to stay on for a public interview. Each council member would then, we would have a public interview with each person. The applicants not being interviewed at that moment, would be sequestered. And until it was their turn to be interviewed. And then, of course, after interview, they could sit in the audience. But each council member would have one question they ask every applicant. Applicants would have 3 minutes to respond. So each of those, each interview would last 21 minutes, more or less, with a little give here or there. And after that, council would vote on the new member by a public ballot. If no one got 4 votes, the council would vote again on the top vote getting applicants until one applicant was declared winner. So this is exactly what was done in 2005 and 2000. At first, I thought sequestered was a little extreme, but after reviewing the process, it does make sense. They wouldn't have the benefit of learning something, like a job interview. The question after we look at process is then timeline. I first laid out the timeline on the left. The holidays are upon us. That makes this a little more difficult. Possibly, but I laid out 2 timelines. One that would accomplish, both would accomplish appointing a new person by the January 30th deadline. One would do that by January 28th. The other would do it faster by January 7th, so that you would have a vacancy for less time. But really, is your preference how quickly you wanted to move or not move? These are just ideas. So with an expanded timeline, allowing more time around the holidays, assuming people might be traveling, might miss the notification, might not have time to submit something, we suggested December 16th to start things, close applications after the holiday on January 8th. On the 21st, the suggestion is to change the open forum count to make that a interview session and appointment meeting. It would be an open meeting, just like any of your other meetings. And then we would have our staff orientation for new appointees, like you all have gone through with staff. Such a joy, right? Mm-hmm. And then the 28th, we would swear that new person in, which is an already scheduled meeting. So this timeline doesn't add meetings to your plate, allows time for people to get this done. But it also leaves you with a gap without a 7th person for the month of January, mostly, right? The accelerated timeline means we get to work day after tomorrow, accepting applications and letters of interest. We close applications December 19th, so 1 week later. We would call a special meeting for you to do interview, session, and appointment on the 21st, and then schedule orientation after the holiday, and swearing in at the first meeting in December. We'd have to do a little schedule adjustment on January 7th, because that's slated as a Board of Commissioners, so we'd have to add a quick meeting there for a swearing in, but could be accommodated if that were your desire. So our questions are, do you have changes to the process, to the interview details, and which timeline? What would you like us to do?
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Well, I've never been a real fan of this. I feel it's a bit of a anointment, but if we have to, then of course, if you can go back one slide, Don.
Of course.
Or yeah, there.
There. Mm-hmm.
You know, I think this process at least is transparent enough for people to feel at least their voices are heard. When you go forward to that slide 16.
To the timeline?
To the timeline. I think the expanded timeline is more reasonable. It allows the community to maybe contact us, make some arguments on behalf of their anybody that might be applying, and then of course hearing out this in front of the public is the critical part, and everything.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree, the expanded time, in looking at the accelerated, I worry that applicants would maybe miss, they'd be out of town. So this one, I think it gives us enough time to get the word out. And then in looking at what we have scheduled, we have the 17th of this month. We have nothing, the holiday break, Christmas and New Year. And then our next one, we have a LHA on the 7th, and on the 14th is a regular session. So that's 2 meetings. The 21st would be the open forum. So it's just 2 meetings, and one's an LHA. So I move for the expanded. I do want to put it out there on the record that I don't feel comfortable. I would have liked to have seen a special election to give that voice to the people. I've heard from legal that, in looking at and analyzing our charter and what those words mean, we don't have a choice in where we're at today. It's not my best choice, but I think this, having an application process, looking at it as a more heartier version of boards and commission interviews. I think having that and making it as open and transparent as possible. So thank you for the slideshow.
Councillor Christ.
Dawn, do you have any idea how much interest you've had in this already?
We have gotten quite a few phone calls, people wanting to understand the process or how to toss their hat in, as you heard this evening. I would say maybe 5 people have reached out to our office, maybe more seriously. Mm-hmm. And we've indicated to all to listen tonight, and we'll know more.
Very good. I also favor the expanded. I think it allows for you to get the work accomplished in case you do have a lot of applicants. And also, we're expecting a long night on the open forum, so it dovetails nicely. So if this is what we have to do, it mimics an election of some sort in that it's public. Ward 2 can put through their best candidates, their best choices, and we'll definitely give them a good review. So thank you for doing this work.
So I do have a question. Where will the application be? Is it going to be online? Will it be in hard copies that they can submit maybe through the paper? How will that work?
Our plan is we'll have an online form that for those that want to file online, but we can always print something if somebody needs a print copy. We always provide that for boards and other things as well, so we'd be prepared for that. We have done a little bit of work to get things ready, but not knowing what the decision would be tonight. Everything's on hold, waiting for a decision. So we would get it up on the website and out on all of our news channels, do
Okay.
all of those things. We've got the communications team ready to hit the ground running with us, thankfully.
And there's no limit on applicants? As
No
many
limit.
people from Ward 2 only can apply?
Correct.
So I agree with the expanded. We need enough time to get the message out to the public, so as to how this is going to work. So I think that you have consolidated direction on this. Councillor Yarbrough.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would say expanded as well for the same reasons my co-councilors mentioned, making sure that enough people have the time to apply, especially during the holiday season. Thank you for bringing up Ward 2, because I know people that were not in Ward 2 thought that they could apply for this position. So making sure that they have to be a resident in Ward 2 is very important. And I know that's the part of the qualification part. But yeah, I think that this process the extended process that you put out, I wouldn't just choose someone. I don't think that's the right way to do it. And of course, with the time frame and with the charter states, we're doing what we can do. And so I like the process that had been done previously within council. So yeah, I like that process and expand it for me.
And I do want to say to the people in the chamber, thank you so much for your interest and being part of our community. And interest in our city. We really welcome your comments, and you can all apply if you would like to be part of it. So hopefully you have trust in us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have
Yes, Councilor Rodriguez.
Well, I was going to suggest that we just do a randomized computer program through everybody that's, applicable in Ward 2 and pull somebody out and volunteer them that they're going to be on council.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll be just completely randomized. It'll be perfect. No, I'm fine with the expanded and also as the process is proposed.
He had given me a thumbs up. So do you have your direction?
I do, Mayor and Council. I did also want to just let you know, as noted in the council communication, we will need to develop interview questions. We do have a draft list, of course, that I've borrowed and found elsewhere. I will send that out to you all, and you can send me back comments or suggestions directly. And then I also just wanted to point out, once we get through this process, I've received questions from staff about board liaison assignments. But we've got to figure out who the person is, and then we can talk about board liaison assignments if what shuffle needs to happen. So that will come soon.
And what I would like, talking about board liaisons, in the next pre-session, I would like council to be able to discuss, do we want to rethink board liaisons? How do they work? Are we going to need them? We've never really discussed that. We've just always accepted.
Very good.
So, as long as you're sitting here, I thought I'd give you that.
I've got it. Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
You're
and
welcome. Thank you, everybody. Councilor McCoy?
You need a motion to recess as Longmont City Council and reconvene as the Longmont Housing Authority Board and Commission.
Yep. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough, that we recess as the Longmont City Council and convene as the Longmont Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. The resolution that we are looking at is, oh, that's right. I was just going to zip right into it. Okay, let's vote. Oh, okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? We are now convened as the Longmont Housing Authority. Me too. So what we are looking at is resolution number LHA 2024-35, signing authority to enter into a cooperative procurement agreement with Omnia Partners for the LHA Security Cameras Project. We've discussed this at the LHA meeting, so I'm going to hand it off to you, Harold.
Yeah, so as you all know, on the Housing Authority side, we've been trying to get cameras in place, and we've been going through the federal procurement process.
Okay.
And this was an item that came up in between meetings that we need the ability to sign this agreement so that we can finish the procurement of the cameras to meet the requirements. But nothing else that has changed in terms of what we've gone over for you. It's just an administrative approval by the board so that we can sign the documents.
Okay. Is there any discussion by councilors? Can I have a motion?
I move resolution number LHA 24-35.
Second, somebody?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor McCoy to move number LHA-2024-35, and it's been seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferry. Any discussion on that? Nope, let's vote. That carries unanimously. Thank you. I move that we adjourn as the Longmont Housing Authority Board of Commissioners and reconvene as the Longmont City Council. Second. All right, I made that motion, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. We're now at mayor and council comments. Are there any comments by our council? Councilor Martin.
I just want to say once more, it's been an honor and a privilege, maybe the best thing I've done in my life. And bye, guys.
Well, that was short and sweet. Bye, Marcia. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just wanted to remind people that today is Colorado Gives Day. Our library, museum, and the Callahan House, and local nonprofits are like the R Center, the Hope, the Community Foundation, as well as the Old Firehouse Art Center, and so many others need your help. This is a direct way of giving back to your community. Please give generously.
So I do have, yep. That's what I was going to say.
Okay, perfect.
We have the Longmont Parade of Lights, and our direction to council was that we have the high schools design and decorate a float for us. That isn't going to happen. We did not give them enough time. Maybe next year. And then it was suggested that we use our new microtransit shuttles. But I rode in one, as did Councilor Yarbrough and Councilor Christ on Monday. Gosh, that was just yesterday. And so long ago. And I realized that they have windows that are shaded, and nobody would be able to see us in there, except for the front seat. So we would have to use all 6 vehicles and one person sit in each one, and that just isn't really acceptable. So we're back to the drawing board on Saturday's Parade of Lights. Suggestions from staff?
Well, Mayor, certainly during the Veterans Day Parade, some people just opened their van doors. I know you said that would be pretty cold, but that's going to be true of any kind of float, but you could open those doors. We could also see if we could have some other vehicle that carries you next to that van so that you're still promoting the ride piece, if that's something that's of interest to you. I do think anything you do might be cold. I hate to say that, but it is December, so I'm afraid that may be a possibility. But you could certainly open those doors. We could certainly, have another pickup truck with you or something to that effect so that you can kind of stay with that van. Or I think maybe we could even make the cars available if that's possible. Roll down the windows in the cars. Those are my ideas at this particular second.
I know this is so last minute as of yesterday.
How many folks are going to be at the parade?
Yeah, I am.
Everybody?
We should have
Okay.
2 vans.
2 vans.
2 of us, leave the doors open, one on each side, because both doors open on
They
the
do
vans.
open, yeah.
And then we just wave and wear gloves and scarf and,
And hopefully nobody pushes one another out.
And then someone can sit in the front too.
Move over, Susie.
Yeah, and someone can sit in the front. So if there's 2 of you on each door and then one in the front, that's 6 of you, so.
Okay, what do you think? Everybody good with that? Are you going to go?
No, wait, no.
All right.
Sorry, it sounds like we can't have 2 vans. Hang on.
So, yeah, so in the break, Councilmember McCoy said,
Oh, okay.
okay.
Right, they can't take the 2 vans out of service because they need to use them for the service.
I might use one to get down there, so.
So, if I can jump in, Councilmember McCoy talked about having some type of bucket truck or something like that. We could potentially do 1 van. I don't know if we can get a,
I do believe they're already in the parade, right, David? I do think the bucket truck, Scott Roche had already worked out for you to be in the parade, right?
There's at least one in the parade that'll be all lit up.
Yeah, one in the parade, plus there is, of course, the fire truck, which I know is tough for some people to get into, but we do have the fire truck also.
so I mean, we could talk about moving the bucket truck up behind the ride-free van, and some of you can get in that and some of you can do the bucket truck.
I do think that the parade routes are already set and everything's already been sent today, but we could certainly have council members on different city vehicles. That might be helpful. Yeah.
I'll ride in the microtransit.
Okay.
I'm not climbing on a bucket truck. Yeah.
I was actually going to suggest that since, I kind of feel somewhat that that's your baby, and I think that you should get
My
the
baby?
the credit for it. And so I think it would be nice to have you in that van, and then the rest, if want to, ride in the bucket truck, and like we've done in the last 2 years so far.
So whoever doesn't mind having the doors open can ride in the van as well. Very good.
Okay, sounds good. So what I'll do is I will let you know which positions all the city vehicles are in, and you're welcome to let me know which one you'd like to ride on, and we'll just take it on that way.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Who else? Does anybody else have comments here?
No, I think
All right. City manager remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney?
Councilmember Martin, I just want to say, while you may not have been the easiest person to work with, I know your heart was always in the right place, and I truly wish you and your family best wishes.
Yes, definitely.
No further comments.
Let's applaud our city council member, Martin. Thank you. And with that, I move that we adjourn. It's been moved by myself, seconded by Councilor McCoy to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Yay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.